Following a media statement today from the South African Human Rights Commission, this statement has been posted on Twitter several times in which people are reading something into the statement that's not there. They're misunderstanding, thinking that the South African Human Rights Commission is simply asking for an apology and a small fine and training for Mr. Baloyi over his recent comments. That's not at all. You have to read the whole statement. But I do want to analyze this statement and compare it to some recent statements that have appeared from South African Human Rights Commission and show the disparity of what's going on there. Well, folks, they make it far too easy for President Trump. Each and every day, the bigotry and institutional racism directed against minorities in South Africa just continues day after day. Look no further than the captured South African Human Rights Commission, which appears to be focused on racial revenge, not on Ubuntu. Let me be clear here once again that I do not condone South Africa's suppression of free speech. If people want to be stupid, let them be stupid, so long as it's not an incitement to violence or public safety hazard. If it offends someone, if it offends their dignity, well, you can sue them for slander or libel, whichever is appropriate. But let society shun miscreants and ostracize them. It's not the state's job to police speech. A state that feels a need to suppress speech is a weak state and an illegitimate state. Now, following Nota Baloyi's vile, putrid racial denigration of white people on an episode of the Hustler's Corner essay published on YouTube on Monday, the 17th of February, 2025, the South African Human Rights Commission reported on the 20th of February that they would investigate the incident. Well, that seems reasonable, no? Pretty quick response and a call for investigation. I think that's fair. But pay close attention to the way in which the South African Human Rights Commission mentions the Baloyi case versus Hank's Old Irish Pub and the Ronaldo Gross cases. I'd also include the Knobs and Kesey case, but those media statements appear to have been scrubbed from the South African Human Rights Commission website. I couldn't find them. And a statement from the 20th of February. South African Human Rights Commission is aware of an episode of the Hustler's Corner essay published on YouTube on Monday, 17th February 2025, where Mr. Nalumololo Nota Baloyi made several statements expressing his views on white people. The commission confirms that its Gauteng provincial office has opened its own accord investigation on this matter. The commission also confirms receipt of several complaints against Mr. Baloyi. That statement, which started the investigation, was followed up on the 24th of February. South African Human Rights Commission will institute an equality court proceeding against Mr. Nota Baloyi for alleged hate speech. Well, that sounds like a good plan, right? All right, let's see if they're going to go after him. Did you watch the clips? Check this out.
White women cannot carry births the same way black women can. They're inferior in that way. We're dealing with the weakest whites that the world has ever seen. I want to explain this so that people don't think that, I'm being racist by saying whites are inferior genetically. We are at the echelon of that. Whites are a step below because they've also got Neanderthal DNA. Unfortunately, by the strictest definition of what a human being is, white people are just below human beings. You are negotiating with an animal, a wild dog that you're trying to train to be tamed, to be upopi. You cannot expect the same behavior of a human being that you're expecting of a dog. We need to start understanding what we're dealing with, because we're not dealing with a who, we're dealing with a what. When we deal with this what of savages, because that's their history, everywhere in the world white people have gone and progressed. They've progressed because of savagery. Don't you get it? No, they don't get it. They will never get it. They're not the same level of human beings we are. So we need to start treating them like infants, taking these white people, teaching them our culture, teaching them how to be civilized human beings the same way we are.
Pretty vile, eh? I'd say that's pretty nasty. And it just goes on and on with this guy. Now, this decision follows utterances made by Mr. Baloyi on the 17th of February during an episode of the Hustler's Corner published on YouTube, where he made several statements expressing his views on white people. Nota expressed his views on white people? Seriously? This was more like watching the SS rolling into town and Heinrich Himmler giving a class on racial supremacy. His views on white people? In their media statements, the South African Human Rights Commission typically posts the following at the bottom. The commission emphasized the critical importance of fostering a society rooted in non-discrimination while actively promoting and safeguarding the right of equality for all individuals, irrespective of their race. Except, in practice, they do not. In the 24th February 2025 statement, the South African Human Rights Commission states that for calling white people dogs that need to be disciplined, that they're racially inferior, that white women couldn't bear children properly, and so on, this is what the commission is looking for. The commission's prayers will include a public apology, diversity and sensitivity training, community service, and a monetary fine, but not limited to these. Complainants who seek other remedies may open a criminal injury case with the South African Police Service. Penny Sparrow and Vicky Momberg's lives were destroyed over words posted on social media and a shock-induced racial tirade that landed Momberg in prison as a convicted felon for her words. And the South African Human Rights Commission thinks that an apology, a tiny fine, and classes will reform the perverted worldview of Baloyi. Now, folks, you may make the point that the South African Human Rights Commission did say individuals can take the man to the court for a criminal injury. But we know that that will fail, as the defense will be that he did not injure anyone by name. He didn't call anyone out. It's just a general statement. The South African Human Rights Commission is supposed to uphold the dignity of all South Africans and stand in the way of racists who undermine dignity. Yet when they're needed most, they are suspect. The tame wording of the South African Human Rights Commission's media statements over perhaps the most vile, racist public statements from a public figure, a music producer, in decades in South Africa stands in stark contrast to the ill, shabby treatment that they meted out against falsely accused Hank's Old Irish Pub and Ronaldo Gos in the immediate aftermath of both of those incidents. December 7th, 2022. The South African Human Rights Commission says it will request a review of the reserve right of admission policy following an incident at Hank's Old Irish Pub where a 25-year-old black customer was allegedly racially profiled. Tambiso Danko was the alleged victim of institutional racism at the pub in Bree Street last week when he was barred from entering the establishment because he was a black person and without a white escort. Now, notice the detail they give there. They give no detail in the most vile and putrid racist rant from Mr. Baloyi. But here they give detail. And this was a false accusation, a setup. They didn't know that at the time, but notice how they go into detail here. Also, they call it institutional racism. It's a pub. It's not an institution. The South African Human Rights Commission is an institution. There's no institutional racism at a private pub. There may be racism, but it's not institutional. Let's jump forward to 20 June 2024. The South African Human Rights Commission will today institute proceedings at the Equality Court in Gaborone against Mr. Ronaldo Gos, a member of parliament, for the alleged racial utterances relating to online media posts. In the video, Mr. Gos allegedly calls for the killing of black people using extremely offensive and derogatory language. This is explicit content, initially published on his YouTube channel in March 2010, was archived despite being deleted and has resurfaced, revealing behavior that is incompatible with the principles of dignity and equality enshrined in South Africa's law. Isn't that what Mr. Baloyi just did? Wasn't it extremely offensive, derogatory language? And isn't it today not something he expressed as a youth 15 years ago? Isn't that incompatible with the dignity and equality enshrined in South African law? Now, in the footage, Mr. Gos allegedly made the following statement. There's a couple things I want to say. Okay. Beep, 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 beep. Notice how they published this. Of course, they put characters in so you can't see the words. But they went into great detail, which they didn't do with Mr. Baloyi. Now, why is that? And let's take finally the case of Nobs Mkhize, who, of course, is famous for harassing, insulting, and threatening passengers on a flight to Cape Town. She was abusive towards colored flight attendants, insulting their dignity over and over again, physically assaulted flight attendants on the flight. She endangered the entire passenger safety by behaving like a fool. And her famous line, of course, which is caught on video, is, "I'm an ANC, bitch," throwing around her weight as an apparatchik, as a member of the government, as a member of the ANC, as a cater. Is this compatible with South Africa's constitution? Does this respect the principles of dignity and equality? No, it doesn't. Also, why are those statements scrubbed from the South African Human Rights Commission website? They did announce that they were going to investigate her at the end of December, and here we are at the end of February and no action. But already just a couple of days after Baloyi, because of the outrage of what he said so racially vile and disgusting, they had to take action, but the action is going to be, a fine, an apology, diversity training. If you think that Donald Trump is misinformed about what's happening in South Africa, then you're delusional. You're absolutely delusional. And I tell this to all liberal whites. I tell this to all people on the far left, all people on the far right. There's more than a dual standard at work here. This is racial oppression. In all these cases. In the two cases, Hanks did nothing wrong. They were set up by race hustlers. And nothing came of it. They were never punished for it. But Hanks nearly went out of business because of it. And the reputation was tarnished by the South African Human Rights Commission. Ronaldo Gos made an educational video 15 years ago, which was intentionally used to target him when he went to government. No investigation into the criminal activity of those involved in altering that video. None. And no interest by the South African Human Rights Commission. Done and dusted as far as they're concerned. Yet they're still dementedly taking him to the Equality Court. Why is that? What is going on at the South African Human Rights Commission? They don't seem to care about equality and dignity. Only one side of the equation. What say you, South Africa? Cheers.